Hello, everybody. We're going to wait for people to file in. Welcome to the PassiveInvesting.com Masterclass. And while we are waiting a minute for people to file in, why don't you put it into the Q&A? Let me know where you're coming from, where you're calling from. I am calling from San Jose, California. And then Chris, I think this is probably your first webinar since you're calling in from the new place, yeah?
First one, other than going solo, I did a webinar on the acquisition process. But hello, everyone. I'm Chris Neary, but I actually am in Austin, Texas. So as I wear my Texas hat here.
Already fitting in.
That's right.
Cool deal. Hey, Rogelio, nice seeing you again. I'll just give about 20 seconds for people to pop in. And you know what? Maybe I want this 20 seconds to be a little bit earlier. You know what? Let's just get started. Let's just go for it. Awesome. So welcome to the Passive Investing Made Simple Masterclass. My name is not Whitney Elkins-Hutten. Unfortunately, she cannot be here, so I am stepping in. My name is Taylor Koo, one of the investor associates here at Passive Investing, investor relations associates here at PassiveInvesting.com. In this live show, we take a deep dive into various topics related to passive real estate investing and help you learn to put knowledge into action and confidently make your first or next investment with us here at PassiveInvesting.com. Make sure to register at PassiveInvestingWithWhitney.com for future masterclass sessions to check out our open deals and schedule a time with her. And then also too, so we are bringing this into a podcast format as well. And so we have released some episodes on, I believe, Apple Podcasts and also Spotify podcasts. So wherever you listen to podcasts, we are starting to upload some of our previous webinars there. So make sure you take a look, leave us a nice review, of course, if you like it. But needless to say, I'm very excited about this webinar because the managing partners have been looking at a deal in Myrtle Beach for the longest time. And especially with all recent events happening, I am ready to dive into this. But before we dive into this, Chris, why don't you, I just introduced you. I just introduced your name. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself and what you do here at PassiveInvesting.com?
Sure. That was a lot of PassiveInvesting.com references, but probably a mouthful. I am Chris Neary. I'm originally from New York, Long Island, more specifically. Past 7 years, I resided in Charleston, South Carolina. That's how I got linked up with the Passive crew. And now I actually just made the recent transition to move to Austin, Texas. So it is very hot here currently. For the firm, I am the Senior Acquisitions Associate for the Multifamily division. I basically am the front-facing lead for all acquisitions pertaining to multifamily investing. I have some experience as well as the other assets, but now my current role is focused just in the multi-sector. So that's a little bit about me. I've been with the company for about 2 years, maybe a little bit more than that. Started out part-time. And yeah, was that too long?
No, I think that was perfect. And then also too, I think it's a very interesting story. If you ever get a chance to talk with Chris on a personal level, figuring out how he got Danny to meet up with him during lunch and make his way into the company, it's a very great story. So let's dive into Myrtle Beach. So like I said, Myrtle Beach has been a place that we have been looking to acquire an asset for the past 2 years, and we finally have one under contract now, Banks at Bridgewater. And before I guess we even dive into the actual market itself, I'd actually love if you can touch on what we actually look for in a market. Everyone's talking about location. What are some of the characteristics and factors that we look for when we are evaluating a market?
Sure. So you have two things. You have the market metrics or demographics, which are highly correlated. So first thing is, who is living there? What type of tenants are currently living in Myrtle Beach? And That kind of goes hand in hand with your population, your household incomes, your job market, things of that nature. And then that kind of coincides to what is the growth of this market or area that you're pertaining or looking at. So you look at population growth, you look at home value increases, you look at AMI, or there's a ton of different, or household incomes, population by age, so many different metrics you can follow. That's necessary for you to do in order to kind of commit to potentially buying an asset in that specific market. And today we're obviously talking about Myrtle Beach, and we can dive into those, but those are, you need to have a certain criteria before you dive into a market itself.
So with Myrtle Beach, you know what, let's dive into it right now. What makes Myrtle Beach so attractive for us as a firm, and why have we been looking at this place for the past 2 years?
Yeah. So Myrtle Beach MSA is actually quite large. So when most people think of Myrtle Beach, you think of the downtown area where there's a bunch of golf, but actually Myrtle Beach MSA goes into North Carolina, believe it or not. So it's quite large. And the reason we look at Myrtle Beach is it's a southern southeast coastal market that has very strong population growth, which coincides to rent growth, market values, etc. So there's a lot of actually people that are migrating, not only from the Northeast, but just throughout the country, that are going to this market. A lot of people would call it, I think if you look back maybe 5-10 years ago, you'd consider this a tertiary market, but I don't think that's the case anymore, just with the amount of growth and private equity that has piqued its interest in this specific market. So we look for high population growth markets, and this is probably one of the strongest tertiary market, if you will.
Well, from what we saw too, I mean, I believe it was the number one mid-coastal city for population growth at, what is it, 4?
It's high. I know it's 3 times the national average. I don't know if you go to different reports, you can see different numbers, but it's well over the teens, even to 20 and 30s. So it's very strong. That speaks volumes right there.
Yeah. I mean, population growth, 40, I just pulled it up, 40% since 2015 and expected to keep that pace until 2027. But then also rental growth as well, being 32%, which is quite incredible, especially outpacing the other mid-coastal cities, primarily in the Southeast. Now, I would love to dive into at least the story behind that more. Like, what are some of these drivers that are causing these people to really come to Myrtle Beach? Like, what makes it so popular?
Well, jobs. So when people think Myrtle, you think, okay, retirement community, 55 plus is what considered a retirement community or whatever. But if you look at actually the expected population growth, that makes about 20 to 25% of the population growth moving forward. In the past, it's about that number as well. So what is making up the rest of that? It's actually young working professionals, ages 20 to 29. They're basically tied for the same amount of population growth, which is maybe not what most people would expect. And then following right behind that is actually ages, I guess it's 30 to 39. So you actually have a larger influx of younger population of people coming in. And that kind of roots from job growth. And we can dive into what are those industries. And I'm going to give you the standards or stereotypes. I mean, they're true to some extent. Is Myrtle Beach is driven by its tourism and hospitality. And yes, that is true, but to a certain extent. It's like a Charleston, it's like a Savannah. But that only makes up about, I'd have to fact check my numbers here, but it's about 20 to 25. I think it's like more close to 25% of the working class is in hospitality and tourism.
24%.
20, thank you. So 24%. And then there's other there are other sectors of the job market that make up the rest of that percentage. And a close second, I believe, is trade. Correct me if I'm wrong here. It's industrial trade and retail, et cetera. And just right behind that is government jobs, as well as your education and your, what's it called? Hospital jobs. Oh my goodness.
Hospital.
Hospital jobs. Those
Hospital
are the
jobs. Right.
you run after, right? But medical jobs is the word terminology I'm looking for.
Medical industry. Got it.
So,
Well,
go ahead, please.
And what I was going to say is you mentioned that Myrtle Beach is pretty large then. And I mean, we're looking very on an outward scale. I mean, this Myrtle Beach has very strong market fundamentals, but now let's go into the submarket then. And in terms of where around Myrtle Beach are we really focused on, and then and why?
Sure. I can give the first one that comes right off the head is Little River, which is considered North Myrtle Beach. The reason I plug that one is actually because we have a deal or two under contract in that location. So it's something that we truly believe in. We're putting that into practice. So Little River, right off the bat, you have a market or submarket, I guess you would call it. Carolina Forest is another one. There's a lot of newer developments coming into that. A lot of people pushing that way. So if you look on a map actually of Myrtle Beach, there is the intercoastal way, intercoastal, which is basically there is this long piece of land between the intercoastal and the Atlantic Ocean. And a lot of the development has already, all of that land has already exceeded its development potential, essentially. So a lot of the newer Class A developments and jobs, for that matter, so you manufacturing plants, et cetera, even golf courses for that matter, are being pushed inland, so west and north and south of that, which is the far end of Atlantic Ocean. So, and then so the Carolina Forest and Little River are those two MSAs or submarkets that are being pushed outwards. And then you have another one that's called Market Commons. So there's actually like a redevelopment area. There's a lot of shopping there. There's a sports complex. And you're seeing a lot of, it's just south of the Myrtle Beach International Airport, which is a smaller airport. Don't be fooled, just like Charleston. It might be international, but it's not super large. So that's another one, Market Commons. And then there's some smaller subcategories of that, but they kind of all stem from those three. That's what we're looking in, at least. When you talk about Myrtle Beach proper, if you will. And a lot of those are, if you look on, if you want to get technical, if you want to look at Myrtle Beach MSA, those are all located basically in North Myrtle Beach.
Got it. And so, now moving forward then, and I mean, since Myrtle Beach is on the coast and it is in the southeast, the big pressing question that has been coming to our inboxes is how has Myrtle Beach fared through Hurricane Ian? I mean, we always talk about, how we are trying to hedge as much risk as we can, as, making sure they have a proper insurance, making sure that these are can fare, I don't know, within flood zones, et cetera. But right. Yeah, how has this fared during?
So good question. A lot of Myrtle Beach is actually not in a flood zone, believe it or not. It's not like a Charleston where it's set below, but it actually fared very well. It didn't really get hit other than some winds or a little bit higher winds and some rain. No damage to the properties that we have under contract whatsoever. Just needed some raking, some heavier leaves on the ground. Pawleys Island was actually affected probably the most, which is south of Myrtle Beach proper. Let's call it about 45 minutes, and they didn't have nowhere near to the extent of what happened here in Florida, sadly. That was pretty devastating. But to that point, a lot of these prosperous markets that we're looking to are in a coastal southeast market. So how do we hedge that risk is, well, we get the best insurance possible, including hurricane insurance at times. So deals in Florida, deals in coastal South Carolina, North Carolina, maybe not so much Charlotte. A lot of times not only investors, but lenders will require, top-notch insurance, and that's what we underwrite for. That's what we're quoted, and that's what we essentially get at the end of the day. So luckily, we have a team member, Brian Bornhorst, is tracking all that, and both most of our the deals at hand. So Myrtle Beach itself fared very well in the storm. My parents were actually in Charleston at the time, and they said it was nothing, just a rainstorm for them. Obviously, Myrtle Beach is about an hour and a half north of that, but basically between Charleston and Myrtle Beach is where it got the brunt of the let's call them the winds of the storm. So
Yeah, and we actually had Ed Gilmer, who's our director of capital markets, visit Banks of Bridgewaters, which is the deal that we're under contract to now visit the asset. And he mentioned that, I mean, the only thing that they needed to do was just get a rake, luckily, and just rake the leaves. So it fared very well.
Yep.
Let's see. And in terms of that, I guess like we've really blown through this. I'd love to open it up to questions from the audience as they are coming in. Let's see. Can you see that?
I did not. Sorry.
Okay. So we have one question coming in. You want to, well, I mean, I won't be able to take that. That'd be you a question.
That's a fair question. It's really case by case, location by location. You referenced the question is what kind of construction is used for residential. I'm not too sure as we focus on multifamily, but multifamily developments, it really depends. So if you have a mid-rise or high-rise building, it's not going to be wood frame, I'll tell you that. But a lot of these garden style properties typically are wood frame. Hope that answers your question. And there's no requirements by what you need to do in any of the MSAs that we purchase. To my knowledge, we're not actively pursuing deals in, let's call it Southeast Florida. So I hope that answers your question. I can kind of build upon some stuff while if we are waiting for some questions to come in, which I definitely encourage any questions for that matter. But so you're seeing in Myrtle Beach a lot of interest, not only from our firm, but firms that are like kind of ours and institutional quality firms. And that's actually driving up a lot of the value of these places. So we've actually seen about a 10% increase just from last year from market sales price per unit, which is pretty significant. And we're, as you know, rates have been a little bit volatile. We haven't seen very much adjustment of cap rate expansion for that matter. That has really been transparent. So there's actually deals on the market in Myrtle Beach currently, not going to name them, but they're still have a price tag with a 3 in front of them. I think that's relevant because we have a Class A brand new development, finishing up lease up in the high 2s per door. So you're seeing pricing still increase due to being able to get the rents that are achievable for that specific cap rate, excuse me. So I hope that's meaningful, but Myrtle Beach, I think, is going to be a market that continues to expand, not only north and south, but inland a little bit, or more so than it has. And you're going to see new developments, which obviously the absorption rates are up. So the vacancies are going to stay low due to that, just because the market can support it with that population growth. I know that got really technical, but I think that's a good way to not wrap it up, but kind of go full circle why we're interested in Myrtle Beach and what's piquing our interest.
That's great points.
Not seeing any questions come in here, Taylor.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions coming either. We'd love to get your questions for these webinars. We love the interaction. I mean, it's always great with me just talking with Chris, and but we'd love some interaction from the audience as well, in case you did have any questions.
I have another little fact for you that I forgot to mention. So Myrtle Beach was the #1 recovering pertaining to employment post-COVID in South Carolina. So it recovered the fastest of any other market in South Carolina when it came to unemployment. So it's just showing that it bounced back really fast, whether their regulations were loose or not. I think South Carolina as a whole bounced back pretty fast, but I think that just goes to show that the jobs are there and people are there ready to go. So
people are migrating in.
Yeah.
Oh, I actually did not know that. That's really interesting.
Maybe it was all the golf there. Everyone wanted to get down there for the golf, but or in my case, up. I'm now in Texas.
Let's see. Okay, I'll read the question out and then. How will Hurricane Ian affect insurance costs, and how will the adjustments of underwriting of assets near the that adjust to underwriting of assets near the coast?
That's a great question, Tyler. We haven't really seen the full effect of that happen yet. I think a lot of the insurance companies. So we were actually we're finalizing our not term sheet, but quotes for insurance for the property that was discussed, and I called the insurance broker on that, and he said, sit tight. Everyone's really assessing the damage due to the hurricane. So we haven't really closed that loop yet, but there has been no concern on his front or the insurance provider's side so far. But yes, we've seen things of that nature happen. For instance, here in Texas, in let's call it, Harris County. So Houston, we had that big Texas freeze that happened that caused tremendous damage because they didn't have but they didn't have the pipes that they have in the Northeast. A lot of the water froze and burst the pipes. And due to that, roughly 6 months later, you had a pretty large insurance carrier decide to exit Texas. And that actually affected not only prices, but just insurance as a whole. Basically made other insurance companies have to put premiums and fill those gaps. And they've actually decided that it was to my knowledge, that it was too substantial that they actually had to come back into Texas and not leave fully. But yes, there is a lagged delay to catastrophes as such. It is part of kind of insurance as a whole, but it fluctuates, right? It goes up and down. It is an ever-moving market, but once you get quoted and you get that insurance, that's actually locked in for at least a year. So hope that answers your question.
Thanks for the question, Tyler.
Okay, I don't see any more coming in.
Yeah, I do not see any more coming in either. In case you do have questions, you can feel free to reach out to myself or anybody on the IR team or Whitney. Oh, we do have another question. Are you guys tracking all new construction to ensure that there won't be an oversupply?
Yeah, so there's some statistics out there that track all the development. Yes, there's also models that show the absorption rates with these population growths. But yes, it is something that we do track pretty consistently throughout all markets. We never want to go into a market that's going to be oversaturated in X amount of time. So yes, not market comments. Myrtle Beach is a market that you're going to see some supply come in, but it's not going to be a rush of units as you can see in other markets. So yeah, that's a good question. Got anything for me, Taylor?
No, I think we went through some pretty solid questions. Got a nice little overview. In case you have any further questions at all, feel free to reach out to the IR team or Whitney, and we'd be happy to address those questions. We all appreciate y'all for staying on and asking some great questions. And then actually, this is going to be a sneak peek for the listeners that are here and what's going to be happening in a couple of weeks. There's going to be a town hall where Dan, Danny, and Brandon are going to be speaking. and they're going to be interviewed by our Director of Investor Relations, Andrew Davis. So that's going to be happening in a couple weeks. If you want to register for more, you go to masterclass.passiveinvesting.com/registration. We are happy that you're here, and we look forward to staying connected, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
everyone.